Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's happy hour. My name is Jerome Billeter, and I'm the HousingLIN corporate business manager. So after a summer break from our happy hour webinars, during which we've prepared the autumn series, we're thrilled to kick off this new series of happy hour webinars today with this key session, which coincides with this week's Accessible Homes Week. So we've been reporting on our social media and on our news channel about Accessible Homes Week. But for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a week of action that is run by HAPPI Housing Association to celebrate what accessible homes can do for a person's well-being, independence, and overall quality of life. So in today's session, as the government prepares to release the longer-awaited Part M consultation and aims to build 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years, we are going to explore the Home Coalition's work and the UK's accessible housing shortfall, alongside our campaign to strengthen accessibility standards in building regulations. So we will also explore how a London authority has been expanding its range of accessible homes for people with support needs, an effort that has been shortlisted for this year's Inside Housing Development Award. Winners will be announced later this month, and we'll make sure to report on this. But in today's session, we're also going to explore how a private developer in the Northwest is incorporating accessible housing design into a major development in Greater Manchester. And we will also introduce the upcoming HabinTeg's new inclusive housing design guide, which will be published soon and published in partnership with RIBA. So with thanks to the Centre for Aging Better for supporting this happy hour session, I would also like to thank all our speakers today for making this session possible. So speakers today include Christina McGill, Jackal Reynolds, Millie Brown, Rachel Wooden, and Shannon Conway. I will introduce everybody in due time, but we are first going to start with Christina McGill, who is Director of Social Impact and External Affairs at HabinTeg Housing Association. So Christina and her team lead the organization's award-winning For Accessible Homes campaign and other influencing activities, including commissioning research to help make the case for change and working with disabled people who engage national and local policymakers. She is also the co-chair of the Home Coalition, and she will discuss today the campaign for Category 2 baseline and HabinTeg's recent work with West Midlands authorities. And Christina is also joined today by Raquel Reynolds, housing occupational therapist at Wandsworth Council Estate Regeneration Team. And Jackal is going to share a teaser for HabinTeg's new inclusive housing design guide, published in partnership with RIBA, and which is based on site briefs she wrote for Richmond and Wandsworth. Okay, that's it from me. So have a great session, everybody. And over to you, Christina. So I think I'm in charge of sharing your slides. So just give me a second.
While you're doing that, thank you very much, Jerome, and thanks ever so much to the HousingLIN for headlining Accessible Homes Week. It's really exciting to have your support for the campaign. You've been in it right from the start, and it's really great to have a happy hour dedicated to the topic today. So I'm really conscious that the overall theme for today was to get beyond regulations, but I am going to start by talking a little bit about regulations. So with the first slide, just people who are around this table and on the line today, I'm sure will need no educating and reminding around this point, but let's just sort of to assess where we are at the minute. So as far as accessible homes goes, and the regulations surrounding accessibility. At the moment, our minimum regulatory baseline is the visitable dwelling standard. And for any of you who've worked with that with disabled people, you may be familiar with its limitations. in terms of visitability, very basic provisions, and not a lot of adaptability, and sometimes not even the step-free access that it provides, depending on the places that it's being built. So HAPPI and others have been campaigning for a long time to push for the M42 category, which is the accessible and adaptable category, to become the new regulatory default. And on the next slide, you'll see a representation of how that might look in the not too distant future, because back in July 2022, the previous government, after public consultation, long-awaited public consultation, had announced that they would amend the regulatory baseline. So that would become our default, and that would leave the category 3 wheelchair user dwellings to be determined by local plans. So that would be the only optional category to be determined by local planning authorities through planning policies. And the stage we're at the moment is we're waiting for the new Labour administration to give us their verdict on whether they're going to follow up on that intended piece of that piece of policy change, sorry. And to do that, there's a next step planned, which is a very small bit of consultation on whether there should be any exceptions to the rule and what those might be. As far as we understand it, that consultation is just waiting in the wings for a minister to rubber stamp it. So there's plenty of us going to Labour Party conference in a couple of weeks, trying to raise the importance of this matter with the new administration and trying to get it moved forward. So that's kind of where we are at the moment, and should changes be announced, we'll be making a lot of noise about that. So on the next slide, just an example of an accessible property. This is one of HAPPI's accessible properties that we built up in Leeds. It's actually a bit of a hybrid because it was built on the segue, it was designed during the segue between the Lifetime Homes Standard and the M42 standard. But when I'm talking about this to people who don't know about accessible housing, I like to say that I feel like these are ordinary, and it doesn't look anything special, does it? It's an ordinary home, but it's got hidden superpowers. So the accessibility of this home is much greater than an M41 home would be, and the adaptability of this home is increasingly important, given the aging population and how people's needs change over the lifetime of the family and over the lifetime of the dwelling itself as well. What we've published this week as part of Accessible Homes Week is just some really, really simple data that we went to some of HAPPI's own suppliers and said to them, with the typical adaptations, what would it cost to do the adaptations that you do to a HAPPI home? What would it cost to do them to a less accessible or less adaptable home? And we found that there's significant difference in the pricing. So the most common adaptation we hear about is the grab rail in the bathroom. So in an M42 home, all of your walls are strong enough to take a grab rail. Whereas in an older type home or an M41 home, that wall could need to be opened up and strengthened. And that makes quite a big difference in price, from £120 at the M42 home end up to £270 at the other end. The more expensive types of items like stair lifts, well, if you've got an M41 or an older home with lots of corners in the stair or a narrow or steep stair, you could be looking at an investment of up to £10,000 to make that change. Whereas in an M42 home, we're looking at more like £2,500. So the case we're trying to make is this isn't just about standards for the sake of them. This is about making good use of public investment, particularly when homes are being supported by funding from Homes England or from local authority housing budgets. So really, really important that we keep on pushing for that change. And another reason that's important is because disabled people and older people up and down the country are making do in homes that aren't appropriate for them. And when we did our piece of work with the West Midlands Combined Authority, we heard a bit more about this. So next slide, please, Jerome, and I'll introduce that segment. So the West Midlands Combined Authority has a really wonderful ambition with regard to inclusion. They want to become the most disability inclusive region in the country. And we were really lucky to be appointed to help them with the housing aspect of this strategy. It's a strategy that relates to health and well-being, to transport and connectivity, economic and work opportunities. And housing was felt to be a really core piece within that jigsaw. And we were really lucky to be appointed to do this piece of work. And we engaged with disabled people as part of that. And I felt that just bringing some of their stories to light as part of the scene setter for this discussion might be really useful. This is just a picture from one of the workshops that we ran. So on the next slide, I've put the overarching kind of feeling, the overarching mission for this piece of work came from one of the workshop participants there who said, you know, whatever experience you get in the outside world as a disabled person where access can still be difficult, everyone should be entitled to a safe and accessible home to get back to. It means everything. And that really became a bit of a rallying comment for the entire piece of work that we did with West Midlands. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I've just popped a few quotes from some of the survey respondents that we had, because I think they speak to different aspects of making do and the type of challenges that disabled and older people are facing out there in the day-to-day world, even if they are housed. So in this first one, a couple saying it was really difficult to find this property in the location where myself and my husband have support. So that is much more critical. The idea of a location, maybe when you last moved home, that might have been something that you compromised on. But for disabled people, that compromise has a much higher price. Support is much more important. So they wanted to stay in that location, but what's the compromise they've ended up making? They only have one accessible bedroom and they've not slept in the same room since 2010. So I don't know which of us, you know, who's in a sort of that type of household committed relationship where you've would think that would be a reasonable compromise to make, but that's the kind of compromise that people are being asked to make with regard to housing. The second quote, another type of compromise, well, there wasn't anything suitable on the council list, so we went private. Now it's very expensive, and the uncertainty that comes with the private sector there, we're worrying that the landlord might want to sell. So disabled people experiencing similar factors as other people in the private sector, but a much more risky situation when accessible homes are in such short supply. And the last one was just around the perspective of a family. And this was a voice that came up quite strongly through our research, that families with disabled children, their needs change frequently and there can be not always listened to, and sometimes the provision just isn't there for families. So in this quote, we see someone saying that when their disabled son wants to be in the living room, they just have to sit there in one spot. They can't move around. They're either in it or they're out of it. And when the dining room is in use, if everyone's sitting around the table, another child has to climb over the disabled child to sit at the table. So I don't know which of us would think that that's a reasonable compromise to make in our accommodation. Next slide, please. We also talked to some professionals as part of this project, and a policy point that seems to be an opportunity for accessible housing, which might be relevant in other areas of the country as well, is the proposals that are on the table around use of grey belts. So these are those poor quality places, or ugly green belt, or the wasteland, old car parks, old petrol stations. And what we heard in the West Midlands was that because it's an area that's got a strong industrial heritage, some of the brownfield land that they've been relying on to work on infill projects recently has been very expensive to get ready for development. So the viability calculations on some of those sites can be very, very stressed. So the grey belt opportunities we felt might be an opportunity for local authorities to think about, well, what could we do there to enhance provision of particularly the more expensive wheelchair accessible properties where viability can be such a challenge. So that's something that may well be relevant for other areas of the country as well, and we'll be certainly looking into developing some more insight into that and maybe bringing forward some policy proposals for local authorities to look at. Next slide, please. So back to the disabled people's perspective, another point that I wanted to make, and I'm sure some of this will come up later on in some of the case studies, is the importance of the whole neighbourhood when developing accessible homes. So people talk to us about the accessibility of shops and restaurants. You know, only half of the shops have step-free access where I live. Car parking on pavements came up a huge amount. So that's kind of, you know, it's both about the design of the environment, but also about the enforcement and implementation of reasonable parking policies. But the actual kind of the danger that those things present to people is came out quite strongly as well. The middle quote here from a parent with a child who has no road or no danger awareness, living in a cul-de-sac that doesn't have any pavements at all. And I know that the lack of pavements would cross over into the whole healthy housing agenda, making places more walkable and wheelable and cyclable. You know, how important those things are when we're thinking about the sort of larger scale developments of accessible homes. Thank you. I think the next one. The final point that I thought was worth mentioning was around the involvement of disabled and older people. I know the HousingLIN has done some really excellent work on co-production over the years, and that really is, you know, it came out very, very strongly that the disabled people that we spoke to really wanted it to go, their involvement to go beyond consultation at the start of the project. They want to be talking directly to policymakers and co-producing strategy, and they want to be involved in any specific individual developments from the beginning right through to the end, to be kept informed about what suggestions can be taken forward and which ones can't and why, because that really gives them the feeling of being valued and included properly, rather than just a what's the word, tokenistic consultation right at the start of a project. So that came out very, very strongly, and the team at the West Midlands are really working hard to develop their disabled people's voice and their disabled people's voice in all decisions. And I think that's going to be a really exciting model going forward. So my final slide before go back again. Yes, even when the work is done, when the job is finished, go back again and check, has it delivered what we expected it to, what we wanted it to? So post-occupancy in a new development or post-adaptation, feedback and evaluation is really, really important to getting it right for individuals. And one final quote here from the survey, from a family where, you know, they have a partly adapted walk-in shower, so that's great, but who was it for? What was it supposed to be achieving? Well, in this case, the autistic son in that family can't tolerate the shower, so they're actually using an inflatable pool within the bathroom to be filled with a shower head. So it's another example of some kind of part-way provision and then a compromise that has to be layered over the top to really meet the needs of the individual family. So we want to stress the importance of feedback and evaluation to help professionals build up their knowledge, you know, to make sure that it can be right first time for more people. So in handing over to Jaquel, I want to just introduce one document which has had the benefit of a huge amount of learning and post-occupancy evaluation included. So this is our new Inclusive Housing Design Guide. It's going to be published the 1st of October as the publication date in conjunction with RIBA. And it's been authored by Jaquel and peer-reviewed by Marnie Walker, who I know is a regular contributor to HousingLIN in different ways. It benefits from Jaquel and Marnie's wealth of experience with disabled and older people in their homes and neighbourhoods, but also critically the working knowledge of how M42 and M43 work in practice and how to do it really, really well. So Jaquel is on hand just to give you a couple of tasters of that, because I hope that you'll all be excited by it and want to buy one. So Jaquel.
Thank you, Christine. And I've only got a couple of minutes, so this is a very quick taster. But just briefly touch on, the guide is broadly based on documents that I've written for Wandsworth, which Rachel might mention too. So they were sort of the basis. But the key aims really are to dispel common myths and misunderstandings around Part M, provide the rationale really for exceeding minimum requirements, and just to show practically how to design spaces inside and outside the home that are flexible, sustainable, attractive, and future-proof for people of all ages with a broad range of impairments throughout their lifetime. So it also looks at things like visual contrast, lighting, acoustics, and I really just want to show how, if you think about design right from the start, it doesn't have to cost more, but in fact can provide significant savings and minimize later disruption. Next slide, please. So this just shows you, yeah, very briefly, there's an introduction that sets a context, and there's also a wide range of current good practice guidance resources. These are now in the appendix, and that includes the HousingLIN. And interestingly, Christina touched on the feedback from the disabled people in Midlands. One thing I was really keen to include was part 1, which is guidance not covered in part M, such as, excuse me, outside space, and just the connectivity to the local neighbourhood. I mean, you can have the most accessible home, but if you can't get out your front door or get to your local community, you know, it defeats the purpose, really. And parts 2 and 3 are broadly aligned with categories M42 and M43, but they're standalone documents, and the aim is that they would be read in conjunction with part 1 as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is an example of one of many technical drawings throughout the text, and one I get told repeatedly, have done for years, that it can't be done, namely an accessible threshold. So we were very keen, Moni and I, to get photos, technical drawings of that in the text, but also photos and insights. And in fact, about a year ago, we put 0 thresholds into Wandsworth. So we've included that as well. Next slide as well, please. Thank you. And as well as one thing we're also really keen to include was actual drawings, but scale drawings with real people in them, to show not only sort of functional use of space, but why things like furnished layouts are so important, and why just the evidence base really for exceeding the minimum. And a big thank you to Carly Dixon, who drew the people. Next slide, please. And as well as the technical drawings and the
Oops.
drop, I don't know if I'm back anyway.
Oh, you're back. Perfect.
So the insights really build on a similar approach that I adopted in the Wandsworth site briefs, particularly where I guess I've come across resistance and just a general lack of understanding, where I find that just by explaining the issue in more detail and using anecdotes from people's lived experience, sometimes it just helped that they could see that I wasn't just asking for something for the sake of it. And the photos throughout are really there to provide clarity as well. And last slide, I think, almost. And we also, is that okay? Yeah.
Sorry,
we also included case studies just to show insights gained from things like sort of certain products and just design features where they did or didn't work. And also we've included what we've done at Wandsworth in terms of M42 adaptable bathrooms, where we've got wet floor showers under the bath. So just a whole range of things, but also particularly to have case studies and hear firsthand from disabled people about what makes a difference to their lives and why. And final slide, please. And here it is. So please order it. I'm aware that was a very whistle-stop tour, but hopefully it's given you a taster. Thank you very much.
It's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you.
It's great, really important presentation, and yeah, looking forward to seeing the guide when it comes out 1st of October. You said, yeah. So we'll make sure to report on it when it comes out, and who knows, it might even be the subject of a next happy hour.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you both, Christina and Jaquel. So we are now, without further ado, we're going to move to Millie Brown, who's the Senior Evidence Manager at the Center for Aging Better. And Millie will present today on new research revealing that at current construction rates, it would take about 44 years to meet England's demand for accessible housing. And she will also highlight the cost of inaction on accessibility standards. So thank you, Millie, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Share my screen. Great, and before I go ahead, can I just check everyone can see that?
I can't see your screen.
You can't?
No.
Oh, it says it's sharing.
Ooh.
Okay, 2 seconds.
Ah, yeah, it's coming up. Oh, something is coming up. Yeah,
There?
there we are. Perfect.
Yeah,
Right.
perfect, brilliant, thank you. Okay, hi there. Yes, I'm Millie Brown, Senior Evidence Manager at the Centre for Ageing Better. I know today's discussion is focusing on how we move forward with that regulation, but actually we did some recent research looking at how the cost of inaction, given the 2 years since the government said they were going to go ahead with raising accessibility standard, the previous government. For those who don't know who we are, really quickly, the Centre for Ageing Better is a charitable foundation set up in response to our rapidly changing population in the UK and the fact we're living longer. I believe everyone has the right to a good life as they get older, and that housing is key within that. So our ask in terms of homes, so we do work a lot with local authorities in our existing homes programme, but our kind of accessible national facing work largely focuses on how we influence government to move forward the accessibility standards, as part of that with the Home Coalition, who Christina said is vice chair of. So our ask is that we make all no homes accessible, that disabled and older people can live in a home that enables them to live independently and with dignity. As part of the Home Coalition, along with Christina, we worked tirelessly 2 years ago to respond to that consultation, which was deemed a great success. However, 2 years later, and given the change in government, it was unsurprising, but before that happened, there was little movement forward to actually put this through to regulation. And as we all know, the kind of current context is that just 9% of homes in England currently have all 4 accessibility features. However, some new research we conducted found that actually the majority, specifically older households with a person aged 55 and over, live in pre-1980 housing. So that's housing that's not built to modern accessibility standards. And therefore, on top of that, because the need for the adaptations is higher, given accessible homes exist on a very small scale, that half of households in England with a person aged 55 and over who need an adaptation do currently not have one. So as I said, I'm largely here today to quickly run you through some research that we did, looking at the cost of inaction of moving forward the higher minimum accessibility standards. So in this time period of 2 years, we have estimated that 250,000 more people could now be living in accessible and adaptable homes if Part 4 and M4 Part 2 had been mandated 2 years ago. The delay actually leaves 1.8 million people in the UK in limbo, and obviously we know of little hope, given only 9% are accessible, of finding a home that meet their needs. At the current progress we're making, shockingly, it would take 44 years to meet the current demand for accessible and adaptable homes in England. And specifically because of a Centre of the Ageing Better, with an ageing population, the number of people that will need an accessibility or adaptable home is likely to increase. And looking at this, while it will take 45 years to meet current demand, on current numbers, there will be 4.8 million people aged 65 and over with a disability in 2036. And as for to say that the kind of colleagues on this call today, the amazing work they're doing. However, this is based on kind of government intervention, and funding doesn't increase, and mandating further. So what are the Centre for Ageing Better doing? Obviously, and the Home Coalition. We're calling for the new Labour government to end delay and bring in it. So actually, we've seen that the new government has shown a willingness to take forward some ideas that are very much linked to kind of health outcomes, tobacco and vapes bill. However, we think therefore minimum accessibility standards, given that focus and health outcomes is real, should be another sensible idea. So what have we done? We've written to Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner to ask action mandating M4 Part 2. I must say, little response so far. We will be responding to the National Policy Planning Framework consultation to make this case again for higher accessibility standards. through the planning process, and it will be good to kind of partner on those who are interested on that. Of course, we have the Home Coalition, but see where we can get involved. And finally, generally kind of our plan at the moment is just continue to raise awareness of the problem, and 2 opportunities coming up very soon, of course, is Accessible Homes Week this week, and that's why I'm here today, and also the Fraud Prevention Awareness Week we see as another opportunity to kind of put this argument forward. And as part of that, Aging Better will be releasing some new data on the benefits of removing 4 hazards from existing homes, and of course some of the importance of building accessible homes to avoid those problems in the first place. So the reason I'm here today is that to kind of afterwards we can share some activities we have coming up through email, and we'd like people to get involved as much as possible, because as I said, at the moment we feel our part is just raising as much awareness as possible as the need of regulation, while my colleagues on this call kind of show the amazing work and the art of the possible. Yeah, questions at the end. So thank you so much for listening. And that was a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Millie. And again, yeah, that was great, short, straight to the point, perfect. And again, we'll help promote any coming products. So we are now going to move to the next speaker, Rachel Wooden. So Rachel is a specialist housing occupational therapist at Wandsworth and Richmond Council. So she champions inclusive, adaptable, and accessible design. She works for Wandsworth and Richmond Council in their housing enablement team, supporting developers and housing associations to build inclusive homes. And also for the council's own development team, who are building over 1,000 council homes on infill sites around the borough, including their own supported housing. So Rachel today is going to share the story behind the Wandsworth initiative to build supported housing for young people, exploring the challenges, lessons learned, and the importance of inclusive design. So over to you, Rachel. I believe
Jerome,
you want
thank
me
you
to
very
share your slides.
Yes, please share
Yeah,
my slides. That would be great.
Just a second while
thank you. And while you're just doing that, just to say thank you for the invitation, for inviting us on. And it's been great because obviously Jax has already mentioned a little bit of what we're doing in Wandsworth, and certainly the guide, the brief that she wrote for us, which is now turned into the Inclusive Housing Design Guide, has just been amazing. And you'll see, so I've got quite a lot of photos, so you'll be able to see some of what we've been doing. This is really scraping the surface, and I think also really want to say at the beginning that we are learning a lot, so it's not perfect, and I will be bringing up and showing you sort of some of the things that we've been doing and some of the mistakes that we've made and some of the lessons that we've learned. So on the next slide, thank you, Jerome. It talks about a little bit about my role, which Jerome has mentioned already. And I think what we're really finding now is having myself and Jax, and we've got another housing OT as well. My role is particularly focused on new homes that are coming through housing associations and developers, as well as of our own council development team. And embedding my role in the system from the very, very beginning of the design process right through to completions. It ensures that the homes in our borough are designed and built well for those who need them. I work with planners, architects, developers, contractors, housing associations, and as I said, our own council development team. And also really ensure that inclusive design is embedded in policy. So we've had quite a bit of policy change, which really helps us in planning stages, and later on when we need to enforce things as well. And it also means that we're preventing new homes having to be adapted after being built, which can be so costly. We've done a bit of a cost exercise on that, and we're saving a lot of money. It's also environmentally unfriendly when you have to rip things out and put adaptations in, and it also causes huge upheaval for residents. So we're preventing all of that. The other really important thing to say is that we work really closely, and particularly my role is working really closely with our adult social care and children's social care commissioning officers on needs that they have for residents. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more in this presentation. So on the next slide, So before I speak about supported housing, a quick mention, which Jax has done already, of our new general needs homes. These we're building as a council, sort of through the team I work with in development, and also the team that Jax works with in regeneration, which is the sort of the major regeneration sites in the borough. And as a council, we're dedicated to building beautiful homes, which are life-giving and encourage people to flourish. So this means building beautiful, contemporary homes with beautiful, contemporary, flexible products which don't look clinical and that are the same throughout the building, regardless of the home type. So you'll see here some of our photos of accessible kitchens and bathrooms that are level thresholds, which Jax mentioned. It is possible to do really good level thresholds, and also parking spaces in our wheelchair accessible homes. So that's M43. And we are building sort of over 10% really in our borough. But again, Jax also mentioned, but it's also really important to note here that we are future-proofing the rest of our homes over and above what's required. So the rest of our homes are M42 homes, but we are also building in shower formers under baths. So that when they need to be adapted, or if they need to be adapted in the future, our adaptations team have much less work and it's much cheaper. And in all our homes, we're using the same inclusive products. So for our next slide, to talk specifically about supported housing, which is what I've been asked to speak about today. It sort of started about 10 years ago when one of our commissioning managers for learning disabilities had a vision for us to start building our own council supported housing. And so we work now really as a housing strategy group, which has been formed, and it includes adult and children's social care commissioning managers from all departments. So that's children, older persons, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health, transitions, but also housing colleagues and planning colleagues. And so we look at the demand and the supply for supported and specialised housing. We look at adopted and future policies. But we also work together on specific schemes from design stages through planning and then out on site. And that's a really key part of my role. And that photo there with our hard hats on is myself and some of our commissioning colleagues in social care on a supported scheme during build. So the next slide shows you the beginning. So this was the dream of my colleague 10 years ago. And it was to build on a council infill site. It had been an old unused community centre in Stag Lane. So this is called Stag House. And we finally achieved this vision back in 2021. And this was through, excuse me, through the creation of our own in-house development team. They oversaw the building of this first supported housing for the council. And that development team, as I mentioned, is responsible for over 1,000 homes of council rent. So Stag House is in Roehampton. We have 10 flats here with double lift access and community staff space. They're all built as accessible. But you'll see on the next slide that we had lots of lessons that we learned. It was our first build. It was completed during the pandemic, which was really difficult. So I couldn't get out on site. I couldn't check what they were doing. I couldn't check the products they were using. We would request products and then different products went in. So we had issues with, as you'll see in these photos, I don't release these photos very often because I'm a bit embarrassed about some of them, but you will see some of the issues. We had issues with door thresholds, with difficult door mechanisms, which doors that didn't have automatic opening, incorrect oven housing, no backing panels on the rise and fall sections in the kitchen, and incorrect shower seats. Some of these issues were rectified post-build because I made sure that they jolly well were. But the residents also fed back about the build, and that's what we really wanted. So from this building, which actually the residents love amazingly, even if I don't think it's perfect, it's a really, really well loved building and scheme, and we got lots of feedback from them. So we got great feedback which influenced our next build, and it also meant that we wrote a design brief. So along with the briefs that Jax had already written, I wrote a supported housing brief based on residents' comments and with colleagues in social care. So the residents' comments and that brief, then informs our next schemes. So the next slide shows our scheme that was completed just a few months ago. This is Colson Way, just at the end of last year, and we put into practice what we'd learned at Stag House. It was a smaller building, so we were able to avoid any long corridors. Each floor's just got 2 or 3 flats. We provided some accessible garden space as well as indoor communal space. We provided a really much better improved kitchen layout. Please note in that picture that there is going to be backing on the rise and fall kitchen worktop, so please ignore those wires for now. But the next slide will also show how we are catering for lots of different people. So although one of the homes is wheelchair accessible, built to M43 requirements, we have also wanted to ensure that all the homes cater for people of lots of different impairments and differences. So, so we've catered for people with mobility difficulties, limited reach. So we have partially accessible kitchens. We're really aware that there'll be may well be people living here who experience sensory overwhelm. So we've got washing machines in cupboards where we can, and much better soundproofing. For those with visual impairment, we are tried to get much better tonal contrast in kitchens and bathrooms and flooring and walls. And the next slide shows some flexible products. So that shower seat by Huey, we use in all our homes actually, in general and supported, but it can be adjusted in height once it's on the wall. Much less clinical feel. That shower riser doubles up as a grab rail. Really nice stainless steel, homely tiling with colour contrast. Long-lasting, good quality products with lengthy warranties, and products which are inclusive and cater for all. But this next slide is probably my favourite. This was just sent to me recently, and this is a picture of the residents, happy residents at Colson Way, who are loving their new home, and we're just waiting for some feedback from them. I don't really want to move on from that slide because I love that one. But anyway, let's move on quickly because I haven't got much time left. But to think about our next schemes, we've got 2 more in the process, and we're still taking what we've learnt. Lessons from both Stag and Colson Way. Our next scheme in Roehampton will actually be a passive house build. And if you'd like more information about that, I spoke for Neurodiverse Connections recently about the challenge of accessibility and net zero, particularly thinking about our passive house developments. So for example, one of the things that's going to be challenging on this site is finding door thresholds, which are truly accessible, because they don't seem very compatible with passive house builds. If anyone knows, please let me know. But along with everything we considered for Colson Way, we're also including a dedicated and carefully designed accessible sensory garden with a specialist garden company. So you'll see some early images of those. And then on the next slide, we have a very large scheme of 50 flats in Tooting, and this came about as a bit of a surprise. It came about through a conversation between different departments in the council. Because we found that housing associations in our area pulling out of supported housing, the developer was left with this really large building of 50 plus flats, all 1 bedroom, 2 people. And it had planning permission, but they couldn't find a partner. So I helped to broker a conversation with our own development team. And we will now be partnering with this developer and building out this really large mixed use supported housing scheme. So it'll be for those with learning and physical disability, enduring mental health conditions, sheltered housing for older people, care leavers and temporary accommodation. And we're looking at it and designing it with adult social care and other colleagues. All the flats have the potential to be fully wheelchair accessible. We have 3 lifts, contemporary wet rooms, inclusive fixtures and fittings, and a significant proportion, probably 14, will have fully accessible kitchens. There are extensive shared gardens, large communal rooms, smaller communal staff sleepover flats, and also potential space for a community cafe. So it's a bit of a watch this space for that one. And then on my last slide, simply to say that what we've been doing in Wandsworth and what we've been learning in Wandsworth, our neighbouring borough, Richmond, with which we have a shared staffing arrangement, we are starting to put into practice there as well. So we don't have our own council homes in Richmond. They were taken on by RHP over 20 years ago. So with RHP, we're partnering, and with them and our adult social care colleagues, we are building a new supported housing scheme in Richmond called Meadows Hall for young people with learning disabilities. And we'll be using what we've learned from our Wandsworth developments, using our own council designs and the supported housing brief we have written. So that is a fly through all our developments, and I hope that's been helpful and interesting.
There you go. Thank you, Rachel. Sorry, I was struggling. Yeah, thank you very much. That was great. Fascinating presentation. Thank you for sharing the journey and the lesson learned. Sure, lots of people in the audience would really appreciate that.
Actually, Jerome, probably should say that that's coming out as a case study, isn't it? With HousingLIN.
Yes, it will come
shortly.
out soon. Yeah, shortly. Yeah. So yeah, again, we will let everybody know when it's out. So I'm just gonna have to, yeah, I'm afraid time is going very quickly. So I'm just very briefly going to introduce our last speaker, Shannon Conway, who's the co-founder of Picture This. And Shannon will talk today about the development of their mixed age community project in Stockport, and emphasizing how inclusive design has played a central role in shaping the 245 apartment scheme, I believe. So over to you, Shannon.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for inviting me to be part of this. I feel woefully underqualified, having listened to the speakers so far, and really inspired as well. So Rachel, there's lots I'd like to talk to you about in our journey, what we're trying to do. There's a lot of crossovers, so thank you. I thought I'd break it down really into who we are, what motivates us, what we're trying to do, why inclusive design is so important to us, and finally how we're actually putting that into practice. And I'm conscious of time, so we'll go as quickly as I can do. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to move on to the next slide. So who we are, there's a picture there of myself and co-founder Mike Nicholson. We've both chartered surveyors. We've both worked in the residential world for the last 20 years in sort of urban environments, valuation, advising people, and worked in development as well. And one thing, we sort of sat down a few years ago, one thing that has frustrated us really is the private sector and the missed opportunities that there are to do really good things. I think the affordable housing sector is streets ahead in terms of thinking about long-term, thinking about design. And we just really wanted to get under the skin of it and find out why that was. So that was the start of the Picture This journey. And we came to the point where there was three main areas that we felt needed to be improved in the private sector. And that one was listening to customers and reacting to feedback, knowing what people want and what they need from their homes. The second one is looking beyond the red line of the plot that you're developing on and really thinking about the neighbourhood and the community and how you can benefit that and vice versa. And a third one was long-term stewardship. So really thinking about how if you're developing something, you can stay involved and take that forward. So on those bases, we developed Picture This, and the idea is it's private development, which is different to a lot of what we've heard about today. As I say, the affordable housing sector is streets ahead, I believe, in this, and it's just really thinking about doing things well, and having good values that underpin everything that we do, and remaining custodians in all the projects that we do. So before I get into what motivates us, I'll tell you where we're up to in our journey. We officially publicly launched in January. We've got our first scheme of 245 apartments in Stockport. It's all private, it's all for rent, and it's all owned by one landlord. It'll probably be a pension fund. And we have designed it in line with the joint venture developer and the architects, landscape architects, and with lots of feedback and lots of help from different groups of people. And then we will operate it and manage it as well to make sure all the values that have been put in are carried out, and we're there for the long term, essentially. So I'll talk a little bit more about that on future slides. So, and the key thing, sorry about this, is it's for all ages as well. So we're thinking about all people from sort of 8 months to 80 years old and beyond and before. So it's for everybody. So when we knew what we wanted to do, we wanted to really get to what our core 3 impact areas were going to be, our core values. And the first one's inclusive community. I'm not going to dwell on this one because we're going to come back to this. The second one is carbon conscious. So we've made a commitment that all our schemes will be passive house, low energy. So really interesting to hear Rachel's experience on that. But really thinking about how we embed a carbon conscious set of principles within the development, but bring all the community on board with that. And then the third one is neighbourhood values. So it's really connecting people with the neighbourhood around. It's really thinking about how we can support local businesses and local charities and give our residents a sense of belonging in the wider community. And just listening to people talk, thinking about the space around the building as well, and how we make sure that works for people. So I was asked to talk about why inclusive design is so important to us. And I've got this slide on the screen, but I'm not going to talk through this. This is the slide that we normally show to our funding partners, or sometimes to planning committees, or other developers, or people that we need to convince that it's important for us to be building inclusively. But I believe everybody on this conference knows all of this already. So I thought I'd talk about why, from a personal point of view, it's so important, and what the journey I've been on. And I think, like most of us in this sector, it is a personal one. I grew up with my nana, and she was, you know, when I was 12, she was 80. So we entered into my adolescence years, and she was older, and she handled them stoically. And then when I left home and went to university, there was and she needed support. There was little available apart from care home facilities for her. Later on and that was not the right choice for her, and it impacted her significantly. Fast forward 10 years, 20 years, and I'm chartered surveyor. I remember the first time I went to an extra care scheme and I was asked to look at it and value it, and didn't know anything about it. And I was just blown away that there was this ability to live independent lives as you got older. And that really got me into thinking about how we develop a greater range of homes for people as you age, really, and just make sure it's appropriate, and there's the bigger selection. And the missing middle really interested me. People who couldn't qualify for social housing but couldn't then go to exclusive retirement communities, and then also the other missing sort of period of people who don't want to live in a segregated, age exclusive building, but their current home doesn't meet their needs or aspirations. So this has always interested me. It hasn't been a niche concern. I've always been interested in this as well as residential, but it's always been something that's always sort of held my attention. And I've sat on the Greater Manchester Housing Planning and Ageing Group now for a number of years. So really an interest in this. So when we set up, picture this, the inclusive community, in all honesty, it was about age inclusive. That was the main drive of it. And with the Ageing Hub, the GM Ageing Hub, there was a guide, creating age-friendly developments. And that was the guide that we wanted to have and put into practice at picture this, Stockport. And then on a drive, I was listening to Radio 4's Money Box, and I heard the piece about accessible homes, and it was Habinteg, and it was the LSC had brought out a report, and there was a lady speaking about her experience. She was a mum, she had a young son, and just how difficult it was to find homes that were suitable for wheelchair users, this huge gap in the market. And just listening to it, suddenly thought, well, hang on, we've got 200, almost 250 homes here. We can do something here as well. So that's when we first got interested in actually increasing having a look at the M43 provision in our scheme. So yeah, it was a radio show. That's all it was. It was listening to Radio 4, and on the back of that, that's when we brought 10% M43 adaptable homes into the scheme. So overall in Stockport, it's M42 throughout, and it's M43 adaptable in 10% of the homes. So it's probably a good idea to start talking about Stockport. Essentially, how we came across is a developer had the site and they'd really hit a brick wall with what to do with it. And we approached and said, would you consider us, delivering a picture of this scheme here? They were very good and said, yes, go ahead, see what you can do. And then that's when we started to get involved. So how did we put everything into practice? Well, I firmly believe that if you design something from the very beginning, it's a lot more efficient and cheaper to do it if you sort of go backwards, as everyone who's spoken today has talked about. The first thing we did, the whole project team had a copy of our values and why Picture This exists. If we're not delivering inclusive communities that are passive house, low energy, that are benefiting the neighbourhood, there's no point Picture This existing. That's the point of why we set up and what we're trying to do. We want other developers to follow what we're doing as well. We want them to see that it is achievable. So our values document is the first thing that the whole project team gets, so that they're on board with what we're trying to do and what the purpose of what we're doing is. The second thing is we go into the general market and we find out what the actual need is in general. So in Stockport, there's a real need for 3-bedroom apartments, which wasn't being met. So here we've got 17% 3-bedroom apartments, and they're for families as well as sharers or people right sizes who want to move from larger homes but still want a large apartment. Then we started looking at the design guidance, and that's where we brought in the Creating Age-Friendly Developments guidance that GM Aging Hub had put together. And then we started looking at the M43 adaptable, and then we started talking to people with lived experience as well, to ask what their feedback was. So certain design decisions, if it was made on where the M43 adaptable apartments go, we didn't do that without speaking to people first and finding out what their feedback was. We're thinking about social interaction and loneliness, and a group from Vancouver, who I met through the GM Aging of actually called Hey Neighbour, taking some of their design features about how you create spaces where people organically meet. So we've got a community laundrette and lounge here, which allows people to meet. But interestingly, washing machines, we think we're going to put them in the M43 after speaking to users, just so they don't have, if they don't want to, they don't have to use that community laundrette, but they can if they want. The lounge is there as well. And then we've got a rooftop communal growing space, again, which is being co-designed with a CIC, and taking lots of different people's needs into consideration. Looking at neurodiversity as well with Stephanie Kyle, who I think speaking on HAPPI Hour, not next week, I think it's the week after. That will come into the sort of interior design and some of the facade treatments as well, and the entrance. And then we had a sort of very open public consultation, but that's just a part of the wider consultation piece. As a whole, we will continually be going back to people and asking what works and what doesn't work. I'm conscious of time, so I've got some photographs here. So the photographs at the top, really, they're actually of a scheme in Copenhagen, but that's the sort of view, the sort of feel for the rooftop. That will be open to the wider community as well. There'll be workshops that are run up there. Obviously, not these beds. Everything's a bit higher, and it's really been considered with different users in mind. And then similarly, you can see some CGIs of the building. There's ground floor space on there, and rather than have it as a separate retail unit, we're opening that up to the wider community as well. So there'll be workshops, opportunities. We've met the residents group in a neighbouring over 55 scheme who don't have a space for their residents meetings, so they can come and use our space for those. So really opening it up to the wider community. This is I've included this because there's a few extra photographs and some of the things that we're offering. So as I say, it's not age exclusive, it's not a supported living scheme. It is, what we're trying to do is do a private rental scheme, which just so happens that it's M42 throughout, and there's some wheelchair adaptable apartments there for people that need it. And hopefully by doing this, we can show other developers that it is possible and it can be done, and it should be the norm, and not, something that people sort of look at and think that's different, or that's not something we'd seen before. And finally, just really our ambitions, we want to make this something that is prevalent across the country. We'd like other people to do it as well. We don't want to be the only ones, and really it is creating a blueprint for other private developers to follow. And that's me. I hope I got through that and it all made sense.
Great, Shannon. Yes, yeah, it did make lots of sense. Yeah, thank you very much. That's brilliant. So we were going to move to the Q&A, but unfortunately, I think we run out of time, which is a real shame. But I see that Christina and Jacques have been busy answering some of the questions in writing. So we'll make sure to upload all the questions and answer on our website, along with the recording and the slides, and share it with everybody. I think also, if there are any burning questions really that you'd like us to answer urgently, so I would ask delegates if you can just email us simply at info@HousingLIN, and we'll make sure to share your questions with our speakers today. Right, so it was a great first session to kick off the new series. I just wanted, as we unfortunately are gonna have to not go through the questions. There were lots of very interesting questions. I was just wondering if we could just go around the table very briefly, see if you have any, if any of you have any last things they'd like to say, or a final comment. So maybe if we start with Christina.
Thank you. Well, it's just really great to be amongst a team of people a group of people who are inspired by this topic, and I can tell that it's lit up a lot of energy from the audience as well. So I just reflect, it just makes me really happy to know there are people who kind of get it. And I think, like, hearing all the examples of people actually building these brilliant homes, it just shows that it can be done. So I just hope that we've created another little vortex of inspiration here this afternoon for people to go away and do similar. I've got high hopes.
Great, thank you, Christina. Jacques?
Yeah, well, mine was very, very brief, but obviously working with Rachel, I've also got a lot of experience. I guess I'd just like to say to Shannon, and I know Rachel's doing the same, I guess, yeah, for years, we've also been doing it in the private sector. And one thing I'm really passionate about, and I've written quite a few blogs about, is that you can build and design beautiful M43 homes that are adaptable and flexible. And in fact, we've had some developers use them as show homes when they get it. And that there's just a massive market out there that I haven't taken highlighting, but it's sort of joining the dots. And there is sometimes a bit of a, developers tend to think it's a negative. And I don't know why. I guess maybe they think accessible, institutional, but no, I mean, yeah, just what you're doing is really fantastic, but then it's definitely been done, and it can be done. Yeah. Well done. Cheers.
Great, thank you. Millie, one last comment.
Yeah, I think just to echo like the great work that's going on, because obviously we focus on a national level about getting regulation. And I think the more and more we bring to light great work that's happening, it's kind of less of a opportunity for the government to ignore it, because actually, they say, well, it's not possible, but actually we can see today that it is possible. So I think just thank you to my colleagues for doing that, and hopefully continuing to do so, and hopefully through the Home Coalition and Christina, we can continue to kind of shine a light on the work you're doing as well, and show really what is possible.
Okay. Thank you, Millie. Rachel?
Yes, ditto to all of that. And I think also to throw out a challenge that fully accessible is actually not very different from adaptable, but makes a massive difference. And it and yeah, so I would just throw that one out. If we could be building sort of the M43 fully accessible homes rather than just adaptable, would be great. And really happy to have conversations and happy to answer any questions after this webinar.
Thank you, Rachel. And Shannon?
Nothing more to add really, apart from one of the things that's been really interesting is going through the process on Stockport with all the team, the architects, the landscape architects. They're seeing the very easy wins that you can do for no extra cost in everything, and then they're taking that to other developments that they're working on, and it's that highlighting of just the really simple stuff, maybe bench design or the way you enter a building. It's really simple, easy wins, no extra cost, and sometimes will save you money. And it's passing the word that way through all the architects and the landscape architects and the cost consultants and the M&E and all of that. I think so it's been great that the whole team has got on board, understand why we're doing it, and then they're able to sort of pass it on and pass it on and pass it on, really. But I think you're right, there's for private development, there's a worry about it's institutional, inefficient space, usage of space always. But I think a lot of it is just not really knowing what it is, and there's enough products around at the moment, really cool, lovely products that you can use and just make accessible homes look fantastic. So yeah, it's just spreading the word, really, isn't it? And like I said, the RP sector, there's lots of really good evidence, and I think, like I said, I don't think we're alone in doing it in the private sector at all, but we need to be doing it on everything, I believe, and that's the ultimate goal.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shannon. And yeah, so thank you all for a great session. Really enjoyed this first session of the autumn winter series. Lots of great information, lots of great questions. I'm really sorry we didn't have enough time to go through it, but we'll do our best to answer your questions offline. So just a reminder that if for any additional resources on accessible housing, be sure to visit the dedicated pages on the HousingLIN website, which are the Design Hub. I think Sally should be posting a link to those pages. And if you also want to discuss any of the points raised today, have unanswered questions, or want to discuss how the HousingLIN can support you, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@housinglin.org.uk. And so yeah, final thank you to all our speakers. Thanks to our audience for your questions and comments. It was brilliant. And thanks, Sally, for your work in the background. And as mentioned, we will upload the recording and the slides on our website within the next couple of days. We'll also include the question and answers that have been answered in writing. And we'll send you an email as soon as these are available. Also, one last reminder, please complete the very short feedback form, which will appear on your screen when we close this session. And also a quick note about next week's happy hour session. So we're going to build on, in next week's happy hour session, we're going to build on today's session, and we'll delve deeper into inclusive strategies for creating supportive homes and environments, but particularly for individuals with learning disabilities and for autistic people. So book your place and hope to see you next week. And take care. Have a great week. And thanks everybody again. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.